This is Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
Welcome to the podcast, Chris Graham, and it's Friday, which means my co-host today is Jerry Carter. And Jerry is, he's bowl tripping right now. He just got off the plane as we're recording this podcast, and I believe, Jerry, you're in Idaho, getting ready to go to Boise to the Blue Turf for today's bowl game. Talk to me about where you are and what you're getting ready for.
Okay, it's actually in Salt Lake City for right now.
Okay.
This is the layover stop, and just got off Delta flight. We got a couple hours before we head to Boise. And I will admit that you and I joked back and forth about how warm and sunny Las Vegas was last Saturday. Boise, the high today, I believe it's going to be 42. And the low is going to be 24. So we'll start out by saying I'm dressed a little differently for sure. That's I'm hoping to survive it. But yes, the blue turf. And Chris, I'll share the same thought with you that I shared with my son, Chris. I said, when it's time to do your NCAA bracket, and there's somebody in the office who wins the bracket, and all they did was pick which mascot they liked or which uniform color they liked. And I was telling him, I said, I'm just going to see the blue turf today. I don't have a better reason. It's just one of those things. I said, it looks really cool on TV, the blue and the orange stripes. I said, I wonder what it's going to be like to actually get to see it in person. So that brings us up to speed for today. It is Western Michigan and Broncos' old team, BYU, that'll be playing football later.
Yeah, Virginia played on the Blue Turf last year and actually beat Boise State, a really good Boise State team, a 10-win Boise State team last year out in Boise on a warmer day. It was middle of September, and it was 70-some degrees, and so Virginia has had really good experiences on the Blue Turf of late, if you want to say that. And Broncos' old team today is favored by 13 against Western Michigan, who just extended its coach's contract after the first couple of seasons. And so BYU back in a bowl, Western Michigan in a bowl, and that game today kicks off at 4 o'clock Eastern time. And Jerry, it's funny, you're in Salt Lake City, so you're making a trek that there may be some fans joining you to make that trek up for Boise. Late arriving fans like you anyway might be making that same exact flight that you're getting ready to for your trip to the Blue Field.
Well, it's going to be interesting, Chris, to see what the crowd will be like. And I'll give you an example. One of the cities, they've already made the announcement that next year Myrtle Beach is joining the bowl group. They will be the next city to host a bowl. And one of the Funk Bowls, actually, just in the past few years, was Seattle. Seattle actually had a bowl, and it lasted for a few years, and they're sitting there going, well, who wants to come to Seattle in December and play an outdoor football game? So when you get there today, I know you and I were watching the game on TV. When you're in a bowl like the Las Vegas Bowl, the attendance for it was just over 36,000, and those people were the fan base and the students from those two schools. You had two sidelines lined up, in a scenario to where you could tell who was who, and they're on the correct sides. You've got a game today where Brigham Young. Now, I would expect there to be some BYU fans on the plane today because it's just a short loop. But Western Michigan, it's going to be interesting for me to see how many folks, this close to Christmas, are going to get on a plane and make the trip out. So that's one of the things I'll be looking for today. I believe that the bowl will be supported well by the local folks. It'll be interesting to see how many Western Michigan alum and parents and such make the trip out. That'll be one of the things I'll be trying to see, other than how cool the turf is.
Yeah. The local fans there do come out in good numbers, having watched that game in the past on TV. Virginia played in that game, I believe it was 2004, it's hard for anybody on this side of the country to make that trip. Western Michigan, right in the middle of the country, still a long trip right before Christmas. But yeah, that'll be interesting to look at. Hey, while I'm thinking of it, Jerry, I've got in my office here, I've got the TV on no volume, but I'm seeing highlights of the Duke Texas Tech game last night, which I got to watch. Did you get to watch any of that game last night?
I absolutely did. I was attending a triple header for the women for the second day in a row. Different site, different tournament, but there was a break in between the second and third game. So because I was in Las Vegas, not only did I get to watch it, but I had made a wager on it. And it's funny is that my dad and my wife were watching it with me. And my wife, and people would think our roles were reversed. I'm pretty calm watching Duke play basketball. My wife is anything but calm. And I'm sitting there holding a ticket because Duke was a 10-point favorite. And again, I'm always talking about, Scott Van Pelt, how much I like his bad beat segment. But that was a fascinating game to me. And the true fan is going to understand, even when the shots aren't falling, those kids do everything else. So you're sitting there, and if you want to talk negatively about Duke, they couldn't hit a three, they turned the ball over, they committed 6 offensive charges. Chris, they did all of those things, but you know what they did? They won in spite of it. They won in spite of it against an undefeated team ranked 12th. So when you're sitting there, and Cam Reddish was having another day where he just could not hit a shot. But he didn't stop playing defense. He didn't stop on the other end of the floor. And that was probably, it wasn't as exhilarating as the Gonzaga game, only because, the Gonzaga Duke game, only because they were both, it was more of a run-em-gun-em, up-and-down the court type thing, where Texas Tech, the defense, everybody had talked about their defense. That was my first time watching them. And what slowed Duke down, and it won't show up in the highlights, but the highlights in ESPN are going to show the dunks and the blocks. But the Duke freshmen in the first half were whistled for 5 charges. And Texas Tech was doing a phenomenal job of switching off and helping, and with the help defense, to where the Duke big guys didn't know how to react to that. So then they just started shooting threes, fear of getting more foul calls. And they were at one point 0 for 14 from 3. So when you could play a game like that and have all of that go wrong, and you still win the game by 11, which I have to smile when I say 11 because it means recovered. But it was a fun game to watch, and I think that Texas Tech and what Chris Beard's doing down there is phenomenal, and he made it to the Elite Eight last year. I think he's going to have his run of that conference.
It was clear to me, the commentators in the game last night noted that Chris Beard really wanted to schedule this game, and he contacted Duke about playing the game. And Coach Krzyzewski got back and said, "Sure, let's play. Let's go. Let's play in New York." And to me, there's no secret why Coach K wanted to play this game. This was a dry run for this Duke team to get ready to play 2 games against UVA. Texas Tech doesn't play the exact style of defense as Virginia. They don't play a pack line defense. They do play aggressive man-to-man. They won't switch out of that into a zone. Virginia won't either. And they do play great help defense. And there are some similarities to the way Virginia's pack line works. Virginia will hedge on screen and rolls and basically double the ball out of the guard's hands and make you spin the ball around and quick passing to get the ball to the open man in the post. And they gamble on the fact that they'll help behind that and take away those passing lanes. And it always feels like there's 6 guys on the floor defensively, sometimes 7 rather than just 5. And they'll also slow the game down offensively, and Texas Tech does that too. It's a little different, again, than what Virginia does. Texas Tech's version of the motion offense, it seems like, is more pound the ball into the floor and intentionally take time off, whereas Virginia is very deliberate, but there's always constant motion, so they're making you work while they're pounding the ball. But still, the same thing. It's the tempo is a big thing, and also that defense and the help defense is a big thing. And so for Coach K, if he goes and plays a game against a team with a fast pace, that's not going to get you ready for Virginia. This game was totally about a dry run. Hey, here's what it's going to be like, kids. Zion, RJ, Cam, this is what it's going to be like playing Virginia twice this year, at Duke in January and Charlottesville in February. And so get used to this, because at least for 80 minutes this year, maybe more. Maybe we'll see him again in Charlotte. Maybe we'll see him again in the Final Four. You're going to have to play this style of ball and beat a really good team. And so, yeah, to me, that was impressive, because Duke, struggled for a long time to play the pace, to get used to that defense playing the way it does. But then when they did finally get used to it, they didn't wow with offense. In fact, what I look at in this game, watching this game last night, around 6 minutes to go, Texas Tech had a little surge and had a 4-point lead. And then Duke down the stretch outscores Texas Tech. I think it was a 20-5 run closing out. And so, yeah, that's exactly what Coach K wanted. He wanted a tough game from Texas Tech. He wanted his guys to get punched in the mouth a few times, and he wanted them to respond, and they did.
Yeah, they did a phenomenal job. The closing run at the end was 15-3. And I know it's tough, and there are people that keep remembering, and now they've been playing now together for 6 weeks. That's a very experienced Texas Tech team, very much like Gonzaga. And Chris, the adjustment, the stat lines aren't, other than Zion's, aren't going to look that impressive. But RJ Barrett and Cam Reddish both showed me things last night that I had not seen from them yet. It was fascinating. Everybody knows that Zion fouled out. Well, Barrett was playing towards the end with 4, and he picked up 2 of his on charge calls. Towards the end of the game, what he was doing is he was driving to the basket, but instead of going forward, he was pulling up. And all of a sudden, he's hitting floaters versus being in a situation to where he's trying to draw the contact. And the only call that was kind of it happened so bang was the 5th foul on Zion. I've never wanted to be one of those fans who wants to question every call, but that was the difference in that point. That would have been an and one, and adding to the lead versus your most talented player leaving the court. But again, Barrett towards the run, especially once Zion had fouled out, Barrett was the one that was making the adjustments. Again, and you took the words out of my mouth on the prepping for UVA, because UVA's defense is not news to me, or doesn't come as a surprise to me. But that was the first time since the Elite Eight last year that I've watched Texas Tech play that defense, and it was absolutely impressive. And Coach K's he saw the expressions on the stage when he pulled the starters right there with 30 seconds to go, and the genuine hugs that both Barrett and Reddish got from him. And Trey Jones absolutely was carrying the team. He's so quiet, and you and I had talked about it earlier in the year. He doesn't have to get the points. He doesn't have to get the stats. But when he feels his team needs him, he takes his game to another level. And I think he ended up with 6 steals last night. They had officially another 7 blocks. I saw 2 national columns this week written talking about the fact that this is the best defensive team that K's had, which is a mouthful to say, but I agree with that statement. I think that the thing that separates these young men is they play over the court.
Yeah, I think a big part of that is last year's team we saw was very different defensively. And because they had 2 big guys. The 2 best players from last year's group were 2 big guys in Wendell Carter Jr. and Marvin Bagley III. And Carter's a good defensive player. Bagley could be, but did not commit to playing defense. And as a result, they had to play a lot of zone. This year, this team is built like teams of the modern era more. They're not as big. Williamson is the inside threat, and he's 6'7". They're built though like you look at the best NBA teams right now have guys who can play multi positions. This team is similar. Williamson is 6'7" and is their best post player. Barrett is, I think he's 6'7" or 6'8", somewhere in that range. Reddish is also a bigger guy, but they could play multiple positions offensively and defensively. They look a little bit like, and Virginia, I think, is actually built very similarly, with guys who can play multiple positions offensively, defensively. That's the way Golden State plays. That's the way the Toronto Raptors play, and so they're athletic. Their best three players, the best four players, including Jones. He's smaller, but their best players are athletic, can switch when you have pick and rolls. They can switch defensively and guard the guard. They can guard the post either way. And it was defense last night that changed it around. When Texas Tech got up 8, it was still relatively early, maybe midway through the second half. It was Jones. There was one play where he stole a ball right out of a guy's hands, and another where he was hounding the point guard for Texas Tech so much deep in the front court. I mean, way back around, just a few feet inside the half-court line, that the kid ended up, he couldn't get past Jones, and he ends up dribbling the ball and falling down out of bounds. That really spoke to his personal man-to-man defense, but it was really defense that turned this around, because you look at what Duke's numbers. Barrett shoots 7 of 22. Reddish is 1 of 7. Williamson even 4 of 9, and he was 0 of 4 in the second half. Duke shoots 38%. They're only 3 of 20 from 3, but they win this game by 11 points against a defensive team because they out-defended a really good defensive team in Texas Tech.
That is exactly it. And he said the official count was that they got their hands on 7 shots. Chris, they were 2 or 3 guys. There was one sequence, and if ESPN showed highlights of defensive plays, Texas Tech had a fast break. Guys going in almost uncontested. Get back, Duke gets back, and causes the guy to have to resituate, if you will. And that defender runs out of bounds. And then the guy resituates, goes back up, and the next guy blocks the shot. Again, and you don't ever want to talk about how good something is by comparison to how bad something was. But last year, Duke's problem was their lack of defense. And you if you watch the second half of that game, there's 2 or 3 hands in the air on every shot that Texas Tech was putting up. And that one possession, it was when Texas Tech was ahead, and it would have put them another basket ahead, and it looked like an uncontested layup. And like I said, the first defender made the guy not shoot the ball, and the second defender came by and blocked it. You're sitting there, and it's kind of corny to say, but this looked a little bit like UVA playing defense last night. Again, different format, different setup, but they won a game by out-defending a defensive team. And Chris, I'll take it a step further. I think that the Gonzaga game allowed them to be prepared for what happened last night. The fact that they had already had somebody basically punch them in the mouth. They had already had a game where they had been behind. I think that helped in the situation to where when they got down 8, I don't think they panicked. I just think they became more focused. I'm not sure if they pulled that off if they hadn't already had the experience with Gonzaga.
I will say, if I were, and I guess I'm watching Duke more closely this year than I have in years past, just because I think that those matchups with Virginia will be so titanic, in the fact that we have 2 of them in the regular season to look forward to. If I were game planning as an opposing coach, I might want to take advantage of their aggressiveness around the rim. And we saw it a little bit last night. Zion Williamson's 4th foul was on a block attempt. And that can be something. I thought the Texas Tech kids last night, yes, you pointed it out. I mean, they were not only the 7 blocks by the Duke players, but they altered many shots. Whether they were altered directly or just indirectly by the fear of having a shot blocked, that certainly had an impact a lot on Texas Tech's shooting woes last night. But that can work against you. Carolina, as an offensive team, for example, North Carolina, they have bigger players and they're a fast-paced team. They may take advantage of that a bit, take advantage of the aggressiveness a bit, and I don't know that those guys will be quite as sheepish as the Texas Tech kids. And maybe Virginia too. Maybe you look at that and you game plan a little bit with better athletes offensively. You might say, let's go up strong and make the referees basically decide, was that contact worthy of a foul call or not. And I would say for Williamson too, you talked about that fifth foul. I thought it was a bang call. I thought it was a good call, but it was definitely a bang call. But both his fourth and fifth fouls, he's going to have to grow through that a little bit. He had 3 fouls in the first half, missed some time as a result because of the third foul, and then he picked up that fourth foul and had to go out around the 10-minute mark at a danger zone time for Duke. That was at a critical point in the game, and he didn't need to go contest that shot. Discretion, better part of valor. And then that fifth foul, whether or not you agree with the call, he made the referees make a decision. Was that a block or a charge? And maybe you do what Barrett was doing a little bit, like you pointed out. Maybe you pull up there a little bit. Maybe you pass the ball off. He's got to stay in the game longer. I mean, he really put his team in jeopardy with those fourth and fifth fouls, having to miss several minutes with the fourth foul and then being out the last 3 with the fifth. His team rallied around that and accounted for that. But boy, he's got to be on the floor, and he's got to make sure he's on the floor. Don't give the whistles the ability to take you off the floor in those key moments.
It's the foul that really stuck out. You mentioned the fourth one and the fifth one, and the fourth one he was trying to make a big play, and you can almost live with that foul. The third one was just silly. He was 30 feet from the basket. I mean, the fact that the bump took place, that was the one when it happened. I'm going, that's the one that Coach K is going to talk to him about, saying, hey, you've got to be smarter. And it's funny in the fact that the same way that the alley-oop dunks get people fired up, the blocks this year are the same way. Again, 2 nights ago after they played Princeton, and it was a situation to where I'm watching the top 10 plays, SportsCenter's top 10 plays, and the block where Zion hit his head on the backboard, okay, was number 2. You're sitting there and you're just going, it was neat to see, not him hitting his head on the backboard, but that they're showing the defense as well. And you touched on North Carolina. We haven't talked a whole lot about them, but the game you get to play, somebody beat this team by so much, and then they beat this other team. Let's take a look at North Carolina just for a second. Michigan, how good is Michigan? I mean, they ran North Carolina out of the gym. And then, 2 weeks later, I know it's home court both times, but 2 weeks later, North Carolina didn't just beat Gonzaga. They whooped them. And I know that Gonzaga is missing 2 of their starters now, and it was a bad time for that because of the strength of schedule. But, after the Michigan game, I'm going, okay, Roy's got some work to do. Michigan then made them look pretty bad. But you turn around in that situation, I got to watch the Tennessee Gonzaga game was one of the better games I've watched this year. But the North Carolina one, that made me stop and go, wow. I guess Roy's got the 2 of these guys. They're playing awfully well. So it's going to be fun at the top of the league this year for sure.
It is, and that Carolina team, that win over Gonzaga was extremely impressive, given what because Gonzaga's played a tough schedule so far. We noted the win over Duke. They played Tennessee, now Carolina, so they've already been very battle tested at this stage. And for them to go to Chapel Hill, now that's on a campus site, it's on a home court for Carolina. So sometimes you want to say, maybe they had to travel across country, so factor some of those things in and think that through. But that said, Carolina controlled that game really from the outset and put up huge numbers in that game and never really seemed like they were tested in that game by a Gonzaga team that has that impressive win over Duke earlier this season. So, but that's the thing about, and I'll say this about, and this is again why I think Coach K. In fact, it was mentioned last night during the game by the commentators. Why Coach K scheduled this game. In addition, they didn't say about the Virginia part, which I think we both agree on. Get ready for Virginia, but also he wanted his young team tested against a very veteran team in Texas Tech. Both Carolina and Duke will have this one issue, and it'll pop up from time to time in the regular season particularly. They're young teams. They're very, very talented teams, but they're also young teams. And And so, part of Coach K was wanting to have his team play in the biggest arena in the world, the most famous arena in the world, the mecca of college basketball, against a good veteran team in a tough environment. Just in that standpoint, it's the energy of New York is the energy of New York, because that's a test, and but it's not the same test that you'll get on the road in the ACC, and not just Charlottesville. I mean, gosh, anywhere in the ACC, even second and third division teams in the ACC on their home floor are tough outs, and young teams will have to respond. And as talented, and there's no question about the talent level of Duke and North Carolina, their ceilings are very, very, very high, but they're going to be tested. And last night was a test for Duke. We'll see if Carolina can, go through some similar tests coming up here in the next few weeks, and certainly the ACC season. But that's where ACC season will be more important, maybe for those two teams than say the veteran team, a veteran team like Virginia. For Coach K, for Old Roy, they're going to want to see their teams respond in these tough situations on the road, because even though the games that matter in March in the NCAA tournament, they're not road games. Duke and Carolina will be highly seeded teams. They'll be a 1 or a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. And I know this from last year. When you're a 1 seed in the tournament and you're playing in an arena and the team you're supposed to beat is ahead of you, it becomes a road game, because everybody else in the arena, aside from your fans, are rooting against you. They want to see the upset. So it becomes a road environment. And you're going to have to win some games. And those young teams need to have some tests like Duke had last night, to get ready for March, and have some of that muscle memory to get ready for March in that sense.
One thing, again, Duke has played, Hartford, then they've played a couple of Ivy League teams, but there's already now, they've played 4 top 15 teams. They've played Auburn, they've played Gonzaga, they played Indiana, and they played Texas Tech. Kentucky is the, probably even a more potent one than Indiana. So it's been a good mix. Now they're off now for 2 weeks before they play again on the 5th. But let's switch sides for a second, and let's talk a little bit about the UVA South Carolina game. We shared a laugh about the UVA sweep. We got the first out of the way. But look at that game, and the one day, part of what will always stick in my mind last year is nobody could pick up the slack when Hunter had a bad day. Well, Hunter wasn't playing in that game last year. Hunter struggled against South Carolina, but both, I hate to use the backhanded Robin thing, because I think UVA is the ultimate team of teams as far as picking each other up. But I thought that they really, the supporting cast to Hunter, if you will, played outstanding on a night when Hunter didn't have his best game.
Yeah, I'll mention 2 columns I've written this week on Augusta Free Press. They're actually getting a lot of reads. We'll talk about Hunter first. He's had a few struggles of late, and I'm a little concerned. And I'm only concerned in that his ceiling is the highest by far of anybody on his team, but he's not playing anywhere near to that level yet, or right now, I should say. His last 2 games, the VCU game before the exam break, and then Wednesday night against South Carolina, he's a combined 3 for 16 from the field, and he's got 14 points. He only got to the line once against South Carolina. He had 5 points, shot 2 for 10 from the field, had 3 shots blocked. He had an air ball, and he looked like he was floating around. What concerned me as much as anything is South Carolina. Frank Martin, he's a great defensive coach. He doesn't have a lot of talent this year. They have a losing record. They got some guys hurt. They were on their home floor. But he went to a zone at a couple different stretches. And usually Virginia's zone offense is so good that you don't want to play zone against them anymore, except when you're Syracuse and you play zone, that's all you play. But when teams try to mix zone into their packages, Virginia normally punishes you. And DeAndre Hunter was really good against the zone last year. The 2 wins over Syracuse, the win at Duke when Duke played zone against Virginia. The soft spot of any 2-3 zone defense is that area right below the foul line, and you're trained to flash right to the foul line. You get in the paint real quick. You flash back out if the ball doesn't come to you, but you flash right below the foul line in the paint. You catch that pass, and then what you do is you force those guards who are the 2 of the 2-3 zone to think, okay, do we crash down? If we do, the guy might punch it back out for an open 3. If you don't crunch down, then all of a sudden, the guy who catches that pass there, Hunter, has an open jump shot unless the defenders on the 3, the back line, jump up at him, which then opens up a seam for a pass to a cutter on the baseline, one of your bigs on the baseline. So last year against Duke, last year against Syracuse, he made those jump shots. He made the passes either to the wings or to the guys on the baseline, and it really was effective as a zone offense buster. Against South Carolina, he had it didn't seem like he had a clue. Like he completely forgot how to play against a zone offense, and it's to a point that Tony Bennett in the second half went to Braxton Key in that position, and Key was very effective. Made a jump shot, made a drive to the basket, made a couple of assists, and Hunter just kind of floated around out there. And so Hunter is the alpha dog on this team, at least in terms of talent, but he's not playing like it right now. And that's got to change. For Virginia to have success, of course, I'm saying this about a team that's ranked 3rd in the coaches poll. They haven't lost yet this year. They'll likely enter ACC play with a 12-0 record. But they're not playing their best basketball right now because their best player is not playing his best basketball right now.
Yeah, again, and I think that's the difference between the end of last year and the beginning of this year. I'm watching the game, or we'll just call it the 4-letter game. But watching that game, you're sitting there and you're going, these guys look lost. And at the time, Hunter wasn't the household name, if you will. It wasn't like this year. He came into this year and everybody's saying, hey, this guy's NBA, just got going. Hunter was a nice player last year, but I felt they looked lost without him in the game. And what I was seeing in the South Carolina game was anything but that. It just, the old concept of, hey, next man up. And it's a situation to where they keep winning every game. And, of course, I think that UVA is going to eventually catch up with Duke for every non-Duke fan. There's a non-UVA fan just from a style standpoint. Different reasons to not be pulling for them. But UVA, I thought, played a tough-minded game against a tough-minded team and won in spite of Hunter and all the struggles that he had. I think if they play with that same level of confidence, then we don't have to talk about Maryland, Baltimore County. But again, it was the same thing last night. It was a treat for me. My dad's 85 years old, and to get to share, watch a sporting event that I'm passionate about with him. And I was explaining to him. I said, wow. I said, if the glass is half empty, someone's going to talk about how bad Duke struggled. I said, to me, the glass is half full. I'm going to say all of that they struggled with, but yet, what did they do? They took when Reddish couldn't hit his shot. What did he do? He just played defense harder. He did all of the other things harder. And I saw that same thing with the UVA South Carolina game. I was thinking, these guys are going to do what they have to do to win. And the question now is, when will the loss come? I mean, it's an if. But, you're sitting there, and now the Tech's gone. There's still a handful of, undefeated teams. I just think that later into the season you get before you lose that game. I mean, we're talking about 1976, the last time somebody won it without losing a game. So I'm kind of relieved that Duke got theirs out of the way, and I'm not thinking it's going to be the only one. But the amount of pressure it's not like the NFL where the Miami Dolphins are popping champagne when the last team loses a game. But I think that the further a team goes into a season before losing a ball game, the more pressure they're starting to feel. And so, again, I don't think we'll have to worry about that. I think the ACC is so balanced at the top this year. I'm going to be shocked if anybody gets through without losing 3.
Yeah, I would say the same. I think the over-under for the champion is 3, and I'm going to go with the over on that, but I think 15-3 certainly will win it. If you're 15-3 and you don't win it, then we're both surprised. But I think 14-4 could win it. And there was a year a couple years ago that 13-5 won it. I think Carolina in 2016 was 13-5, the year they won the national title. The ACC is that deep this year. There's going to be 6 teams ranked in the top 25 again coming up on Monday when we look at the polls. And 3 of them are top 10. Florida State and Virginia Tech are right outside the top 10. You've got to play on their floors. They can beat you on your floor. All these teams, there's that kind of depth in the ACC this year. And that's why, and I'll say this too, Duke fans know this already. Their teams have won national championships. Virginia's team has not won a national championship, but they've been a number 1 seed in 3 of the last 5 NCAA tournaments and not won a championship. I think Virginia fans are still so new to this whole process of being elite level that, I know the fans in the last couple of seasons that have been really good. It was 2015 when there was an undefeated record into the late part of January, only 1 loss all the way to March. And then last year's team, of course, was 31-2 going into the tournament, number 1 overall seed and number 1 in the polls, all that kind of stuff. The UVA fans get uptight about, gosh, what's our ranking? What's our seed going to be? And these things. And I think now if you're a UVA fan, you know what? It's nice to have a ranking. It's nice to have as few losses as possible, but the most important games are the ones that are tipped off in neutral sites in the NCAA tournament, and those are the ones you want to be ready for. And you don't want to lose a game in January or February. You don't want to lose one in November, December. But everything's a learning experience, and so you want to test yourself. Sometimes it doesn't hurt to get smacked in the mouth. And there was that Duke team that won the 2015 national title had 2 really ugly losses in early January. There was a Miami loss at home by like 19 and NC State on the road by 13, 11, 13, 15, something like that. And that Duke team then reeled off a long winning streak to win that national title. You need sometimes to go through adversity, but also, pressure or not, the most important thing is to be playing your best basketball around March 15th, and you've got to win 6 to win a championship. And you've got to beat 6 probably very different teams. You've got to beat a team like Texas Tech last night that'll walk it up the floor and play hard-nosed defense. You've got to beat a team like a Carolina that runs all over the place. And they grab the ball of the net, and they're in the front court within 2 seconds. You've got to beat a team like that. You've got to beat a team that one night, they shoot 25% from 3 all season long, and then they shoot 70% for a half. You've got to beat a team like that. You've got to win so many kind of different games in a one-and-done scenario. Those are the games that matter. And, so I'm looking at it now. And so that's why, Jerry, I'm nitpicking a 17-point road win at a program that was in the Final Four 2 years ago. I'm looking for the things that you can improve on because that's what the coaches are looking for. They're looking for the lessons you can use give to your kids because you want to have something in the tank in March that you can say, remember that game? Remember that South Carolina game when DeAndre Hunter wasn't doing anything? Ty Jerome stepped up. He had 25, Or last night for Duke. Remember when Zion fouled out with 3-something to go and we still pulled away and won by 11 against a tough Texas Tech team? That's what we need to remember because there are going to be huddles in the NCAA tournament where you're going to have everybody around you nervous as heck. And you want to be able to tell them, remember, you've done this before. You've seen this before. You've achieved in this before. You can win this game because of that experience.
Well, to further your point right there, I'm going to give you 2 great examples of dealing with that. One, I would have to say that before they lost in the national semifinal, that the UNLV team in 91 was the best college basketball team I've seen play.
Yeah.
And they come into the semifinal. They're the defending national champ. They're like 35-0, and nobody's even spooked them. No one has even spooked them. And so they didn't have anything to draw back on. They didn't have anything to where once somebody made them play an entire game, there was nothing to draw back on. And the second one, you mentioned the 2015 team that won the national championship because we were sitting there. You were talking about last week. You were talking about a long ride home. 2015, yes, Duke had a nice run in the big tournament, but what happened in the ACC tournament? Yeah. It was that was a disappointing semifinals for both of us. Yeah. And it was a situation to where that's the other thing that you have to ask yourself, yes, winning the ACC tournament is neat. It's awesome. It's great. But you're going to go in and have 3 teams, okay, that maybe 4 teams that could easily win that. And to win it, you're going to have to do what? You're going to have to play a frenzied game 3 consecutive nights. It's a unique situation. Now, the other thing that was different last year, okay, everybody mocked them for doing it. But the Big Ten decided they wanted to play in Madison Square Garden so bad, they held their tournament a week ahead of everybody else. Okay? And everybody had an opinion, it's going to hurt them, it's going to hurt them. Well, is it going to hurt them? Who played in the national championship game last year?
Yeah.
It was Michigan.
Yeah.
So you're sitting here, and the first year that you went to New York, and I still have the confetti you sent me after Duke won the game. I'm sitting there going, well, that was nice. It was nice. But there's no way they're not feeling that. Those were 3 pretty crazy games. They were down in all of them. And it was the same. And then in 2015, when they won the national championship, they got knocked out in the semis. So, again, for both UVA's sake and for Duke's sake, it's got to be about the big picture.
It does.
Winning the ACC tournament would be nice, but I'm going to be bummed if one of the 2 schools that we're talking about isn't playing in Minneapolis. And great, in a perfect world, they're both playing there. But that's what my concern is. That you talk about how deep the ACC is, especially at the top. You might get by with an easy quarterfinal game, but I guarantee you're not getting by with an easy semifinal game, and you're certainly not getting by with an easy finals game.
I think I'm right on this, and I'm not going to look it up to make sure because it would take me a second with Google to look it up. But I remember something about Roy Williams' teams. I don't think he'd ever made a Final Four with a conference champion before, like a conference tournament champion before. 2016 team actually did. They did get to the final and lost to Villanova, but he had made that point once in, I've covered the last several ACC tournaments, and he made that point once in his sort of valedictory press conference at the ACC tournament after one of his teams lost to another team on his way out the door to say, well, I've been fortunate to be to this many Final Fours, and none of them had won a conference tournament. I think that's right, but even if it's not right, there aren't many of his teams. And so, yeah, that's a great point. We as fans, and we as writers too, and analysts and commentators, everything else, for the clicks that we get, we want our teams to play as many games as possible, win as many as possible, because that means people are going to click and listen and that kind of stuff. But yeah, from a if you want your team to win those 6 games standpoint, these games in December, I mean, that was a nice win for Duke last night, and we're very much looking forward. Both of us are very much looking forward to Duke, Virginia, Part 1, Part 2 coming up in January and February. And we want to see our teams win those games. You want to see your team win every game. But, man, oh, man, from the coaching standpoint, yes, you want to win every game, but you also want to be intact. You don't want anybody hurt. You want everybody confident. You want your defense playing as good as possible. You want your offense flowing. You want your bench guys getting enough minutes so that they have something to build on, and in case they need to have more if a guy falls and gets hurt, whatever. But the one-loss record being 30. UVA fans know this as much as anybody. Unfortunately, being 31-2 and being 20-1 in the ACC doesn't mean anything when they throw that ball up on a Friday night in Charlotte in the first round of the NCAA tournament. That doesn't guarantee you anything as far as that goes. So, but that said, I like that fact. I like that. For me, Duke's got some things to work on. Williamson having the issues with fouls last night. First time he fouled out of a game. That's something for him to work on. Staying in the game longer when he's got foul trouble. For Virginia, DeAndre Hunter needs to be engaged more. That's a lesson. Ty Jerome, great experience for Ty Jerome. He's the guy who can step up when DeAndre doesn't. Great for Duke that Tyus Jones can win a game for them with defense. For North Carolina, they can outrun Gonzaga, who is one of the better running teams in the country. So great experience for that to build upon. these are all learning experiences from the coaching staff standpoint. These are all things that they plug into their big equation and say, we've learned a lesson here, and let's continue to build from here.
Well, it's going to be interesting because we need to add one more place that's tough. Chris, it's going to be really tough to win road games this year, and I think that's Raleigh, North Carolina. We talked a little bit about Florida State, and we know what's going on with the bigger schools at the top and how tough Florida State is. But I really like what they're getting done at NC State, and I don't think anybody's looking forward to the day that they go down to Raleigh and play in that building. I think that's going to. I'm not thinking that NC State can win the league this year, but I see them definitely being in a position to hang some L's on some visiting teams when they're playing in that building down there.
I'll tell you what, I've not been to an NC State game as a road game. I've been there for instance like tournament situations, so I know it's a big arena and it can be very loud just in NCAA tournament situations. So I can imagine that in a home situation where they're playing one of the top teams, Duke, UVA, UNC, that could be a really tough place to play. I'll tell you another tough one that's underrated because NC State that arena is relatively new. It is beautiful. I love that arena, and State fans are known for being rabid. A place that doesn't get a lot of attention, but will be, I think, maybe the toughest place, and I'll even say maybe even tougher than Duke for road teams, is Blacksburg, Virginia. That Castle Coliseum. Now I'm going to say it this way: it's an absolute dump. It's an awful arena, but it's small. It's strangely built. It's an old airport or airplane hangar from World War II. So the design of it is not modern in the sense that it's with the amenities and everything else, but the sound comes down from the floor. The student section is right behind the visiting team bench, or not behind, but above the visiting team bench, above that basket. And so first half, you're running down, you're shooting towards the older folks. It's still loud. But in the second half, they are the kids there are rowdy, and that the bleachers, the upper deck bleachers, are right above the basket. When I mean right above, I mean they are hanging above the basket. They seem like they're right on top of you when you're shooting free throws, when you're doing anything, when you're shooting the ball in the course of your offense. I've covered games there. And even bad Virginia Tech teams playing Virginia, which of course being the in-state rival, even bad Virginia Tech teams played Virginia teams tough there because of the home court advantage there. Well, now here's something. Virginia Tech's good now. Buzz Williams has got that program really at a great level, and they play ball the way he wants to. He's got his recruits doing what he wants them to do, and they have that home court advantage. That place is a zoo when they play Duke, when they play Virginia, when they play Carolina at home. I'm not supposed to like Virginia Tech because I'm a Virginia guy, but I'll tell you what, I'm not looking forward to that Virginia Tech game on the road in Blacksburg. That's going to, if Tech doesn't win that game, I'll be shocked.
Well, it's one of those things though. I don't preach it myself, but the one thing that Virginia Tech does, and it's not an NC State, it's the chip on the shoulder, from the basketball standpoint, is they bring the hate. They bring the hate. They're there to make the opposing team miserable. And, and they do it very well. You just talked about NC State, two different buildings completely. The bank building down in Raleigh, obviously newer and Virginia Tech older, but I've been in both of those arenas for visiting games, and they're not just. If you're in North Carolina, you see a game in the Dean Dome, you've got 22,000 people all dressing the right in the same colors and cheering at all the right times, and I'd say they're as knowledgeable as any fan base I've ever been around. But they don't do a whole lot to make the other team uncomfortable. And both Virginia Tech and NC State do that really well. Another building where, again, the chip on the shoulder mentality, again, it's funny because they're such a football powerhouse now, but Little John, the kids at Clemson, they do a nice job of making you feel uncomfortable if you're on the opposing team. And that's we had the conversation last week about was the ACC up or the ACC down from a football standpoint when a bunch of teams were clumped in there at 7-5. We won't have to worry about having that conversation with the basketball league because I think this is going to be the deepest, most balanced league in recent history. I think that there's Florida State, Virginia Tech, NC State, Clemson, Syracuse. That's 5 places that anybody could go in and lose a game. And it's going to be interesting to see. We'll have to mark the tape, if you will, when we go back and look at it and see what the winning record is in the ACC. It's going to be as fun of a regular season as I can remember for sure.
Mark these 2 dates, fans, on your mental calendar at least. Virginia Tech at home against Virginia, February 18th. Virginia Tech at home against Duke, February 26th. So it's later in the season, within about a week of each other. Virginia and Duke both in Blacksburg, and 2 chances to pull the upset. In fact, I look at the KenPom.com power ratings, and I love the KenPom.com. They base they'll actually play all games out based on how the current team's playing in terms of efficiency, that kind of thing. They give Tech let me go back to that real quick. They actually have Tech winning that game against Virginia by 1 with a 54% chance to win, and the Duke game they have Tech losing by 3, but still a 40% chance to win. So, and no Carolina game in Blacksburg this year, so you don't get the trifecta if you're a Virginia Tech fan. And I'll look at KenPom.com. It actually has Duke winning the conference with a 15-3 projected record this year, and then Carolina in second at 13-5. So that's projected records based on how things are playing now, home court advantage, that kind of thing. So even KenPom.com has the over/under at 3. Actually, that would be a push though if we had it at 3. Maybe we need to put the over/under at either 2.5 or 3.5 just so we get some action there, Jerry.
Yeah, I've had a lot of fun with the over and under. I'll try to speak in a few of the anecdotes from the time here in Vegas.
Sure.
Again, I enjoyed going back and forth with you during the Las Vegas Bowl. Some things that stuck out there, and again, I don't think they show this on the television screen, is it's a situation where the Vegas Bowl is an up-and-coming bowl in the fact that it's going to be interesting to see if they get to play in the new Raiders Stadium, which would be phenomenal. But one of the things they do is they actually have a live stage where all the different shows can send people to the football game. So during the commercial breaks, the crowd's actually being entertained by singers, dancers, different sets of performers that you'd have to pay $100 to see in a casino that night. So that was a cool part of it as well. But I think one of the other things that, other than our love for sports, that you and I share in common is I think we're both married to our best friend. And I'm sitting there watching that football game, and of course I told you my rooting interest was Fresno State. I was born just right outside of town there. So we're watching the game. It was a highly entertaining game, and it's coming down to the end. Len and I watched the game, and we're right up to the last play. We're heading out. My wife looks at me and says, because you could hear over the speaker, even though we're outside of the stadium, she goes, "Who do you think's going to win the MVP?" And I was sitting there as I was watching that game as a thing, not in any type of mentality of trying to be a reporter on it or not. And my wife goes, "I bet it's Ronnie Rivers." And I go, "Who?" And then, of course, they give the trophy to Ronnie Rivers. And you're sitting there. It made me stop and look up. I'm going, what did I miss that somebody stuck out that much? Well, all Rivers did was run for 212 yards. So I left there smiling, thinking, wow, I am married to the right person. Not only was she at the game and enjoying the sun, but she paid enough attention to the game and the individual players in it that when we're walking out the building, she's telling me who was the MVP. And after I saw what kind of stat line he had, I felt sort of silly for not knowing that one myself. But a couple other things we had mentioned last week to follow up on. The G League, which is now under its 3rd game. It started out as the NBDL and then went to the D League, and now with the Gatorade sponsorship, it's the G League. And Chris, they are on the cusp of having a minor league system in place, just like minor league baseball. There won't be 4 tiers, but there are 3 teams shy now of having each NBA team have their own G League team. That's how fast the league is growing. And so they had got together, and Mandalay Bay had brought all 27 teams to Mandalay Bay. And they were calling the showcase, and it was there for all of the different scouts and various, business decision makers, if you will, for each NBA team. Well, it was serious enough to the point, Chris, where they actually closed it off to the public. You could go to the Mandalay Bay, and they put you up in a somewhere in between I would say somewhere in between a restaurant and a ballroom, and you could watch the games on a rather large television at what they call the viewing party. I just thought it was. I know that the G League is gaining steam, and I never thought it would get to the point where it matched NBA teams, but they're in a situation now. I just thought that was kind of odd from a fan standpoint of not allowing fans who otherwise couldn't see a G League game to see what level they play at. Because the ones I've seen, I've been pretty impressed. You're sitting there and someone saying, "Oh, G League, what could that be? Is that like playing at the YMCA?" And that part was kind of interesting to me. And again, they're 3 teams away, and now what they're talking about doing, now they're not going to have the Mexico City team be affiliated with an NBA team, but they're talking about putting one of those teams in Mexico City. And the other thing that we had talked about was the different women's tournaments. And this is intriguing to me because if you don't mind participating in a thought process with me here, I have a debate that can go on if somebody says, "Are you a fan of something?" Fill in the blank, okay? And if you'll be my on-air guinea pig, if somebody says, "Chris, are you a fan of the NHL?" Your response would be
yes.
Okay. So now, in my mind, a fan of the NHL, okay, would watch any 2 teams play hockey if they were on TV. That's my definition of what a fan is. For me, where the NHL is concerned, I follow the Vancouver Canucks, and I follow the Las Vegas Knights. The big news for us this week is how Seattle is going to get the 32nd team. It's official now, and they're picking out what the new name's going to be. They got down to 11. So now, from that standpoint, so I don't consider myself a fan of the NHL. If Buffalo's playing Detroit, I'm not watching that game. I'll watch the highlights of it and listen to Barry Melrose tell me what's important about it. It's the same thing. Because the one thing that I am a hardcore fan of is women's college basketball. I just think it's played, of course, in the WNBA as well. But I had the chance to see 6 different games in the last 2 days, and you never know what it's like someplace else other than your home court, if you will. I'm not sure how many times you've watched the UVA women play, but they play in front of obviously they don't play in front of a men's crowd, but they play in a building where they're going to draw more than a couple thousand people, if you will. So the point of the story here is UNLV is holding an 8-team tournament, and for the women, and it starts out with there being in a building that seats 2,000. So capacity to the building is 2,000. And I'm thinking this is a D1 program with five Power 5 teams playing, and they're playing it in a building that seats 2,000. Well, Chris, to say that I think the largest crowd, and this was Kansas, Washington State, Northwestern. It's not like the one that's at at our site where there wasn't any named schools playing. Those ladies were playing basketball in front of 150 to 200 people, and that was a surprise to me. I didn't picture the numbers being that low from a standpoint of how few people were there. So at that site, I joked and said, okay, they're playing in front of friends and family. On the flip side of it, the event I was at yesterday, which had 3 pretty impressive games, and again, there were no Power 5 teams in it. Those people were playing in front of, I can't even say family and friends. They were playing in front of family. And again, this was D1 basketball being played in a nice building, but the highest number of people that was watching one of the games was 39. And the 39 included the team waiting to play next. And I didn't know, again, I know that the average fan doesn't follow that game the way that I do, but does any of that come as a surprise to you, hearing those types of numbers?
Actually, no. And I'll say it for this: you're in Vegas, so there's so many entertainment options out there that you don't. It's not even to say that you're not a fan of basketball and wouldn't go if that was your best option. But when you have other options, and in this day and age, like you mentioned NHL, and you asked me, "Am I an NHL fan?" I say yes, and you said, "Well, if that to you that means you would watch any NHL game." And that's not the same for me. Like, I'm a fan of movies, but I don't watch every movie. I watch some movies I want to see. I watch Caps games, but not even all Caps games. If something else, if there's something competing, there's only so many hours in a day, and when I watch hockey, I love it. But there's other things you can do too. And so for the basketball, I mean, if there was a player there that I wanted to see or a team that I wanted to see, I would be there. But if not, I guess I've got to a point too, though, Jerry, and maybe I'm not the case study because, when I cover a game, when I'm either watching a UVA game on TV when they're on the road and I don't go to the game, and I cover it that way, or I'm there in the arena covering it, whether it's football or basketball or whatever, I'm so engaged because as a person covering it, I'm watching every play, but not even just watching it. I'm thinking about it. I'm analyzing it. Did he do this right? Did this guy do this right? Whatever. That at the end of the 2 hours, the 3 hours, whatever else, I'm exhausted. And the last thing I want to do when I'm done writing about that game is watch another game. I just want to veg out. I want to watch some comedy. I want to watch a drama because I'm done. And so then, for me to turn it back on and watch another game even the next day sometimes is tough because it's still, I'm committed. At this stage for me, I can't watch a game without analyzing it. I can't have fun anymore in that sense. I can't just watch it for the edification of it. I've got to watch it and analyze. Is this guy good? Could this guy beat Virginia? Could this guy beat Duke? That kind of thing. So I might not be your best example of that. But yeah, if I'm in Vegas, I'm probably looking at the tickets and saying, okay, is there a guy there I want to see? Is there a gal there I want to see? Is there a team there I want to see? Or do I want to go see Britney Spears? Or do I want to go pull some slots? Or do I want to go play some blackjack? So So in that context, no, I'm not surprised. Now, if you're in Boise and if you're there for a day or two before the game, that you're going to right now, and there was a tournament there, and I'm guessing there probably aren't quite as many things to do in Boise as there are in Vegas. Yeah, if you had 39 people at a game there and there was not much else to do, I probably would be a little more surprised in that context, if that makes any sense.
Well, it does, and that's one of the things. One of the reasons I go to places that are kind of off the map, if you will, or you just want to see. You want to see. Not every crowd is like at Utah on the women's side. Not every crowd is like Notre Dame. So you go to situations, and you're back to the league games. The first game of the day was at the tournament at UNLV. Okay, had UNLV playing in it. Again, the smaller tournament at South Point had no local teams, and I got the fact that it's only in its third year of existence. But it was kind of funny to me that the UNLV team was played in their own building, and they had the pep band for that, so it didn't sound dead, but there was probably 100 UNLV fans at noon on a game day, and I know it's not that was, I guess that's one that surprised me. It was a situation to where I thought, wow, okay, 500 people show up and maybe they won't stay for the second game, but it'll be the same thing after the Shreveport Bowl. We're going to be finishing up down that way by being in Alabama. And one of the things that's happening there is the South Alabama men are playing a home game. There's nobody on South Alabama playing that I've heard of or know anything about, but they happen to be playing the Richmond Spiders, which is kind of cool. But that would be an experience for me where I would enjoy watching that just as much to see who's there, how they support the team, how do they draw, is there anything unique about it? And like I said, it's kind of, for me, it's the experiment of, it's the same thing today. Do I think that Western Michigan and BYU are going to play a phenomenal football game? I don't. I think BYU just has too much offense for them, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be a situation where it's going to be enjoyable, and I'm kind of anxious to see who all's going to be there. And I just was surprised that there were that few people, not at the event in South Point, because again, there were no Power 5 conferences represented. There were schools like Western Illinois and Fairfield, and so I expected that to play out that way. But I was surprised that a D1 program like UNLV would play in front of a crowd that sparse. But they're playing in an arena that only seats 2,000, so I'm guessing they always play in front of a crowd that sparse.
Probably so. Hey, I got some breaking news, if I can break news on a podcast that people are listening to at various times. The USBWA, I'm a member of the U.S. Basketball Writers Association, has selected its 20 players for its Oscar Robertson Trophy midseason watch list. And of course, this doesn't, in the grand scheme of things, it's just more for fun than anything else. This is a National Player of the Year award that our association gives out. I'm a paying member, so I can say our association. And there are some familiar names, 5 ACC names on that list. Nikhil Alexander-Walker from Virginia Tech. I like seeing that name on there. I like him. He's got some game. R.J. Barrett from Duke. You might have heard of him. He's on the list. Also on the list from the ACC, DeAndre Hunter, talked about here on the podcast. Luke May from North Carolina. Not surprised to see that name. And Zion Williamson from Duke. So, and some other names of players we've seen this year because they play teams that we play. Brandon Clark from Gonzaga is on the list. Jarrett Culver from Texas Tech is on the list. Rui Hachimura from Gonzaga also on the list. Ethan Happ from Wisconsin had a really nice game against Virginia. He's on the list. And Dedrick Lawson from Kansas. Seen him play a few times this year. You saw him in person back at the tip-off a few weeks ago. C.J. Massenberg from Buffalo. They just beat Syracuse. He's on this list as well. Shamari Pons from St. John's, that team that's still unbeaten but not ranked. He's on the list. So, and Grant Williams from Tennessee. So that's fun. The midseason watch list, that just means that you're sort of in the running for, there's 20 guys on the list overall, 5 from the ACC. That means we in the USBWA consider you one of the top 20 players in the country. So I'll be posting about this on Augusta Free Press a little later today. But yeah, some familiar names there, Jerry, for our fans to go over as players who are being looked at as the top contenders for Player of the Year.
Just on that note, one thing that kind of slid by that you and I didn't get to talk about, I don't think at all actually, was the recently completed ACC Big Ten event that ended up, thanks to a late Florida State rally, ended up being a 6-6 draw. And I remember when that event got started and how often we just fooled them. And, I mean, the things weren't competitive. They might sneak a win or two out, and then they eventually caught up and won a couple. I didn't know what your take was. Obviously, Virginia and Duke took care of business. But what was your take on, as deep and as talented as we're talking about our league being, the fact that ended up in a 6-6 draw?
I don't know that. To me, the aggregate doesn't mean as much because it's matchup based, just like the NCAA tournament's matchup based too. But it's matchup based. There's some home court advantage issues that sometimes that come to play. For example, Michigan, North Carolina. That game was played at Michigan, so and I'm not saying that Michigan's not better than North Carolina, but you got to factor that in. If all these games are played on neutral site, maybe that would be different. I like the fact they're played on campus site. That makes it more exciting. I like that Virginia got a win on the road against a tough Maryland team in a really tough place to play in College Park. But no, I don't know if I read too much into that because I don't know. To me, the ACC's depth is at the very top. I think there are, when you talk about Virginia, Duke, North Carolina, Florida State, Virginia Tech, as 5 dominant teams. Syracuse has not played great yet, but they're Syracuse. It seems like the worse they play in the regular season, the better they play in March. So you worry about Syracuse as far as that goes. They've got a lot of talent. They'll fix that up. So they're a team you have to worry about. Louisville may be interesting. We see them play Kentucky this weekend. You may have to worry about them as the season goes on. But I think that it's real. The ACC's success this year is going to be really at the tippy top there. Those 5 teams, are going to be so good this year but from when you get past Syracuse and Louisville, I'm not sure that the last 8 teams in the league are that good. I mean, you're going to see some of those teams win against some of those top 5 and top 7 teams just because it's the grind of the regular season, some home court advantage issues, some guys out, whatever the case may be. So I'm not saying they're not going to win games, but they're not. I don't think likely you're going to see 9 or 10 ACC teams in the NCAA tournament this year because I think the top 5 are going to be so good that they're going to, they're really going to dominate the other 10, and it might make it hard for any of those to build up an impressive enough resume to really get an NCAA tournament kind of consideration going for them. So no, I'm not surprised in that context. I think that the Big Ten might have more depth in the middle and the back end, but that middle and back end, those Big Ten teams aren't necessarily going to be teams that are going to compete for a national title either. Their best teams are also pretty good, and I kind of look at those top matchups more than I look at the whole matchups, and that might be making an excuse for the ACC. I'm an ACC apologist, but that's kind of the way I look at it. I think they're fun events, and I love the fact that these games are played again the way they are, and I love that we have this model that now other conferences are following. The Big East and the Big 12 and, the Pac-12, they play, games like this later in the season because they're aping what we're doing in the ACC and Big Ten. And I love the fact that we're the originators of it. But yeah, I think that good for the Big Ten. You got a tie this year. But for me, yeah, I'm looking at Virginia, Duke, and Carolina, playing teams like Maryland and Indiana and Michigan. And those are the ones I'm valuing more. And our top teams fared pretty well against their top teams.
Well, the one thing I think is safe to say is I think that both Wake Forest, and I'm pulling for Danny Vanny to get that turned around, but I think that Wake Forest and Georgia Tech might be in for long seasons this year. And if you'd asked me a month ago, I would have said, wow, I'm not sure why Capel took that job at Pitt. I thought that the Pitt job might have been the worst job in the country. Everything that they had wrong there, how poorly they played last year. They didn't even, I don't think, scored in double figures in wins. And then basically the roster vanished. And I'm not saying that he's going to be able to play 500 in the ACC, but he sure has them playing hard, and they've stuck in some wins that have been very, very surprising. So I think I think you're correct. I think that our league is top heavy. I just think that the question is where do you draw the edge to the top? I think Florida State is good enough to be one of those teams.
I inadvertently left them out, but no question they're one of the. Yeah, that was a total slip, but they are definitely one of those teams. I agree with you, Jerry.
Yeah, I was pulling pretty hard for them to come back. I think it was Purdue they were trying to come back and beat. Hey, if we got to switch gears one more time, I'm sure you've looked at them. I'm stoked that you guys have the sponsorship in place to go down to Charlotte. and I know that you and I both want to see the Who's play well. What's your key to the game there? What's the one thing that you think UVA has to do to play with the football version of the Gamecocks?
Okay. We're talking about the Belk Bowl, and Crystal Graham is within listening distance of me now. So I've got to do live reads because I've got sponsors. So bear with me, Jerry, for just a moment because you know what? I'll get in trouble if I don't do this. Augusta Free Press coverage of the 2018 Belk Bowl is presented by Bear Creek. Bear Creek building community. It's wintertime, but spring will be here before you know it. Imagine gathering with friends and family for that first barbecue on your new deck. Bear Creek builds custom backyard structures that bring people together. Get started now at bearcreek.co. Brian Mininger, his wife Victoria, they do a great job. And hopefully they're listening in on the podcast here. AFP's coverage also sponsored by Studio 3.6 on East Market Street in Charlottesville, where hair dreams come true. Owner Leah Sampson, and yes, that name's familiar for a reason. Her dad is Ralph Sampson. She doesn't really tout that, but we are for her. She brings her passion for people, hair, and creativity to the salon. Mention this ad for $10 off salon services of $50 or more. Book your appointment online at studiosalon36.com. So there, I've covered the base there. I want to make sure that Studios 36 and Bear Creek get their just desserts there. So keys to the game for Virginia, Jerry, in my opinion, I think getting a pass rush, not necessarily getting sacks. Virginia's defense is not built to be a sack machine. Only had 23 this season, so they're not going to do that. They're not with a 3-3-5 defense. You're built to put pressure on the quarterback, make him get rid of the ball a little quicker than he wants to, but then tackle guys or knock passes down with your fast secondary. And South Carolina's offensive line doesn't give up a lot of sacks. They gave up 20 sacks this year, so that's a matchup that'll be key because Virginia doesn't again need to get 5-6 sacks to make Jake Bentley, really struggle in this game. But he threw for close to 3,000 yards. He's got some big receivers. They move the ball through the air really well. And so Virginia's going to need to make him – and he's a guy – the offense of Will Muschamp is built on, a lot of teams in this day and age, the quick passing game, the West Coast offense influence, you three-step drop, you throw the ball. He's a guy who has built 5- and 7-step drops in. They throw the ball down the field. And so if you're asking your cornerbacks to cover – longer pass routes consistently, that can be a trouble for a defense. So Virginia's going to need to get a pass rush. Also, Virginia needs to get some run game going here. This South Carolina defense is susceptible to the run. They give up 194 yards a game to the run. They give up 4.5 yards per carry. Now, Will Muschamp is the defensive guru of this team. He's had a great track record at other stops along the way as a defensive coach. He's built to stop the pass. In the SEC, they only give up around 215 yards a game passing. They only gave up 9 touchdowns through the air this year. They did give up 28 touchdowns on the ground. So you got to beat them with your ground game. Your ground game also helps because it eats the clock up. It shortens the game in that sense. So I think if you're Virginia, you get pass rush on, you run the ball well, and you keep your head in the game. And I think those are the 3 keys to this game for the Hoos.
Okay, well, let me ask you this one, and this is the dreaded moral victory question. Is there a moral victory to playing this game and keeping it close, or do you feel we need to win for the program to have a good day?
I don't look at South Carolina just because they're an SEC program as being, indomitable to say the least. They're a mid-level SEC program. And so, yeah, you got to go down and you want to win this game. I mean, I don't think there's any moral victory, so to speak, in playing well against South Carolina. But in that sense, I'm kind of hedging here because I think there is. I mean, because last year's experience for UVA was so bad in the Military Bowl. They didn't show up. Opening kickoff, Joe Reed returns for a touchdown, and then the offense doesn't move the ball. You lose 49-7. And so they can't take a 49-7 beatdown here. That will set the program back. I think a good effort, is something to build on for March and April for spring practice, and gives you some positive momentum. But obviously, this program hasn't won a bowl game since 2005. It's a long, long time since they won a bowl game. So, a win puts wind beneath your sails going into off-season conditioning, and then in the spring practice, and then your summer conditioning, and then into the fall. This is a program that has a lot of guys who will be coming back next year. Your quarterback, Bryce Perkins, is coming back. Likely, the key guys on defense will be back. You lose Alameda Zacchaeus from your passing game as a receiver, your top receiver, but you've got some really good kids coming in from this recruiting class at receiver. They got a couple of 6'3" guys, a 6'5" guy who will probably be very valuable early contributors for this program next year. So you want some wind beneath your sails going into conditioning and spring practice, etc. And a win is your best wind beneath your sails. I keep using that term. But I think so. Yeah, I want to see them play well. If you do lose, you better not lose the way you did to Navy last year, because that's going to be a confidence killer going into the next several months. I can give you a sliver of moral victory, but no, they're going down there to win, and hopefully you do see that will that you didn't see last year in Annapolis on that really cold day. I want to see the Who's on the sideline like you see them in the regular season, jumping up and down before every play, encouraging their teammates. I want to see that energy there, because you're going to need it for the next several months getting ready for next year.
The one thing that I've got circled on my notes, and you've covered pretty much everything on it, you don't ever want to put undue pressure on somebody. Not that he's saying it is going to put undue pressure on somebody, but I think for the Who's to have a good day, Perkins has to have an A game. And I'm not talking about statistically. I don't need him to throw for 350 yards. I need him to protect the ball. I need him to extend drives. And I need him. The best way to slow down South Carolina is going to be, as you said, to stay on the field. And I think if Perkins has the kind of game I think he's capable of playing, I think I like their chances. And it's the same, on the flip side of it from a Duke standpoint. Now the question is, it's Temple, and once again, Temple's coach took the job at Georgia Tech. They hired a new coach, defensive coordinator from Miami, and they have an interim coach in between, so there'll be a little bit of disarray. And then there's the question of, is this the last game Daniel Jones plays? And the one thing, Temple's still favored in the game, but the one thing that Duke has going for it is they have just been crushed by the injury bug this year, to the point where surgery. Right now, for the first time, there's not 12 guys on the injury report. So the fact that they've had a month to heal, and again, I did notice that Virginia managed to land a signee out of the ESPN Top 100, which I thought was pretty awesome. I don't study that list completely. I just go down and look for Duke and UVA. But hopefully the offensive line can stay upright, and Jones' ankle will heal enough that they can have a good game. And they've actually won 2 in a row after not winning one for 50 years. Looking forward to watching both of those games. Obviously the one in Shreveport in person, but the one in Charlotte on TV. And I do want to say kudos to Crystal for getting that together. And I hope you guys have a great time down there, and hopefully they'll represent the ACC against those big, mean bullies from the SEC.
That's right. That's what we're looking forward to. Well, this has been a great podcast, and we've helped Jerry kill some of his time in between flights. He's getting ready to go to Boise. He's currently in Salt Lake City, getting ready to go to Boise. And so if you're listening to this podcast, if you turn the game on later this afternoon, because we're all pretty much on winter break now, right? As far as the schedule goes ahead of Christmas. Jerry's there, and look around and make some notes there. But that game is later today, and we're looking forward to watching that and getting ready for the UVA basketball tomorrow with William & Mary and JPJ, and then of course those bowl games coming up next week. So for Jerry Carter, I will sign us off here. I'm going to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year. We'll be talking again before the New Year, but thank you for listening, and everybody have a great weekend.